I didn't think it was changed.
Everyone, put your attention to the board now. Yes. Can you what? No. All right. Chapter 7. We're going to do two things today. We're going to talk about our homework's going to be in our grammar book on using passive and active voice, which is not very hard. We'll go into that in a little bit, but first we're going to do our lecture on chapter 7. And I want you to help me with it. In chapter 7 of Tale of Two Cities, we saw two pretty amazing descriptions of two things. Dickens did a tremendous job describing Tell's Bank, and then we were introduced to a new character. Somebody tell me who the new character was. What was his name? He had a son. His son's name was Jerry. What was his name? Jerry also. And what was his last name?
Jerry.
Austin or something?
No, not Halston. Cruncher. Yes.
Cruncher?
So, up here on the board, I just have like an outline of what I'm picturing this guy to look like. Probably a real...
Is that only half of his body?
Yep, that's his face.
That's a really big nose.
And that's... He's got a big stomach like I do. He's a big guy. All right.
Is that his hat or no? That's a nose.
All right, listen. You're supposed to... You're going to help me with this. What we're going to do is we're going to just start writing little descriptions about how this guy is presented around him, around the house. This is the bank right here, and it gave us very descriptive things about this bank as well. And so I want you to raise your hand and come take the marker, and you're just going to write in just a small writing here some descriptions about this guy. And so by the time we're done today, in your notes you'll have everything about this bank and everything about this guy who works at the bank. And we will have gone through this lecture and you'll be helping me with it. And I'm doing this so that you, to keep your attention more, and I want to see how much you have read about the book. We're going to start off talking about, remember the last scene of chapter 6. And by the way, the test on Friday will just be through 1 to 6. If you noticed last night, it started on chapter 1 again. It's a new section. So I'll just quiz you on the first 6 chapters. But chapter 7 starts off with after they left France to go back to England. It now pictures to us this bank that's called Tell's Bank. And so one at a time, someone come up and take my marker from me and write don't write like a whole paragraph up there on the board. Like write one, if you can, 1 or 2 words that helps describe it. They start us off.
You don't mean like just him in general, right? Not just his looks?
Okay, we're going to start with the bank first. The bank over here.
Well, wait. Can it be like them connected? The bank and him?
Yeah, we're going to get to him second, because first thing shows up. If some of you that are lost to what I'm talking about, if you open up your book,
Is this Tellson's bank?
everyone look at page 38, and you'll see all kinds of descriptive words within the first 2 paragraphs. Okay, go ahead.
Is this Tellson's bank?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you tell one thing about it?
He was like an odd job man.
All right.
That's what it said.
She wrote something up there. Jerry worked at the bank, and she said he was like an odd job man. So that, since she wanted to start with that, we'll just say about that, but we'll describe Jerry later. But outside of the bank,
Bless you.
in a little straw area outside of the bank, the straw was taken from carts of vendors that were going up and down the street, and they would gather the straw and sit it outside the door of the bank. And there was a busted chair that was, the back was broke off, and so it was turned into a little bench. And this big guy named Jerry would sit as an employee outside of the bank. Someone tell me what he actually did. What was his job? Since we're going at that right now. What was his job? You know?
He was the scout.
He was a robber.
He was just really an errand boy, really.
Yeah, he made part-time grave robber.
If they had something they needed him to
He
do,
was.
they would just go out and say, Jerry, would you run and get this? He really wasn't like being a guard or anything. That wasn't his purpose. But he and his little boy, Jerry, would sit out there and they did odds and ends of things that nobody else wanted to do. And so they were like errand boys that went and did things, okay, for the bank. But one would think of, when you think of a bank, I think of my bank that I bank at Northwest Bank, and you go into the bank and everything's clean, everything's nice, all the tellers are dressed in a certain way. What kind of description do we have of this bank? Laurel, take this and give me a descriptive word. He goes into great extents talking about this building, and it's actually surprising that it would be this way.
About the bank, you mean?
Yep. Start us off. We know that Jerry worked there. Okay.
Dark and cramped. That's
Dark?
like my bedroom.
Yes. One would think that it would be this nice, bright-looking place, but it was very dark, and once you walked into it, you kind of just fell up against the counter. I mean, it was cramped. It was what they described as shoulder to shoulder. That's a good description of it. Someone else.
Is there a dash?
Yeah.
Old fashioned. Like my mom. Old.
How many of you have ever been to a used bookstore? How's it smell?
It smells like old books. That smells kind of
It
like.
has a smell, has a certain smell to it. And they went into great extents of describing the smell, that it smelled old, that everything that was in the bank had an old appearance, right? They weren't concerned about fixing it up at all, were they?
Nope.
One of the descriptions says this: it was an old-fashioned place. Moreover, in the moral attribute that the partners of the house were proud of its smallness, proud of its darkness, proud of its ugliness, proud of its incommodiousness. So
Could you say what page this is?
this is on page 38. Now, so it was old-fashioned, it was dark and cramped, and Jerry worked there. Go ahead. Look at that.
Oh, Gracie.
There's more descriptive words. There was the one word I was looking for somebody to say. It was dirty. And they didn't care anything about fixing it up. Although it was a very ugly, dirty, cramped, shoulder to shoulder, They had no desire to fix it up. Here's this guy, and when we get to him, he's no better. He looks like part of the organization. Dirty, just kind of sitting out there out front on a broken stool. It's not the kind of place that you would think would be a professional place. But somebody tell me, Natalie, why do you think that from reading this first page, why were they like this? What was their mindset? They had this one phrase. You remember what that phrase was that they like to use as their slogan? Right down there still in the first paragraph, it's this: if it was less objectionable, it would be less respectable. Now put your mind around that for a second. If it wouldn't be objectionable, then it wouldn't be respectable. So with something like this, you know what? This is the way. Some people are like this. I've done it this way all my life. How many ever heard your parents say, this is the way we're going to do it now? Right?
That's what I said.
Right? I'm like putting my foot down. We're not changing anything. We don't need them. We don't need the internet. Right? I wouldn't even know what to do with a computer, our parents said. I remember we bought my mama, before she died, we bought her a computer. We showed her how she could see all the grandkids on Facebook and stuff. And she went through all the motions of that and came back a week later. Mom, how you enjoying Facebook? I don't use that. You know, she had no desire to want to learn how to do those kind of things. So their basic motto is if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Right?
But it is broken.
It is. It really was. It had need of moving into faith. It had need of being improved upon, but they didn't want to improve it. Let me read a phrase to you. This was a passive belief, but an active weapon which they flashed at more convenient places of business. They had no elbow room, no light, no embellishment. And then it says this, at the end of that first page, that the bank was a description of their country. So, what does that say about the country? If the bank was like this, then the country is kind of feeling like this. This is our history. This is what we are. This is what we've done. It doesn't sound like a beautiful society, does it? This is the way things are. We're not changing. We're not going to improve anything. We're not going to move into the modern age. This is the way it is. This is the way it's always going to be. Some churches are like that. We don't want to change. Leave us alone. You know, when we first came to know the Lord and we received Christ, there was an invasion that happened inside of every one of us. It was an invasion of the Holy Spirit, and as soon as we accepted Him, He invaded us and He permeated into every part of our being. And it was an exciting time. Later on, though, as we begin to mature in the Lord, should we really mature like this? But later on, then, we begin to close doors of our house, and we say, well, this closet, this area I'm not going to change in. Holy Spirit can't be in here. And we begin to sanction all, set aside different areas of the house that the Holy Spirit's not allowed to be in. Where at first we were like, yes, I want the Lord come into my life. I want you in every area of my life. But now all of a sudden, I don't want to change in that area. I don't want to let you in this closet. I don't want you in this room. You can go in here, but you can't go down there. And so we begin to set things aside, and we don't have that same attitude that we had before. Very similar to this. There were some key words. Did anybody find any key vocabulary words. Yes.
Prayer. Like you mean it for the whole chapter? Prayer.
Okay.
Talked about praying a lot.
All right. Let's go. We'll go there right now. When we find that this is the country, this is the dirty, old-fashioned, not willing to change, cramped, shoulder to shoulder. These are all descriptions of this place, and you might want to write all those down. And then we have this old guy, not really old, but Jerry Crusher. Someone come up and describe Jerry and his house that he lives in. Cole, come on up here. The Crusher.
What?
The bouncer, the Crusher. No,
Wasn't it Cruncher?
Cruncher. Yes, it was
Am I
Cruncher.
supposed to describe his house or him?
Yeah, something about it.
Oh,
Gracie brought up a good point about prayer, but let's get some descriptions of this guy here. He's dirty also. Okay.
You stink.
Well, one of the problems that he had that he was complaining about when he got up in the morning is he said this, that every day he came home with clean boots, but in the morning he'd wake up and his boots were dirty.
Must be witchcraft.
So I don't know what was happening there, again, except that other people were using his boots and bringing them back dirty. And so he wakes up and he's in a bad mood, and he's like looking for his other boot, and he's throwing himself, but he gets immediately upset because what does he see Gracie, someone doing in the room?
Of his house?
Yes. Over in the corner of the room, what's his wife doing?
She reading?
She's praying.
She's praying.
She's praying. And so he gives what Gracie said, he gives his attitude about prayer. Aaron, what was his attitude?
Oh, then you thought it was stupid?
Yeah, he thought it was stupid,
He thought
but what did he think about it?
that she was praying against him, and that she was actually praying. She said she was praying for him.
Okay? Imagine yourself like if, for example, say you were a prodigal son and you lived in a house with Christian parents and you heard your mom and say all the time, I'm praying for you. But it seems like this, that when mom's praying, then things are always going wrong in your life. And so you develop this attitude like, don't pray for me. Because you think that when mom prays that God's going to get you. Right? Some people have that attitude about God. Like, don't pray for me. Because I know that God's going to, when you pray, He's going to make me feel uncomfortable. He's going to try to force me to do something that I don't want to do. And so this guy was anti-prayer against his mother, against his wife. He didn't want any of them praying for him. What was his attitude of, how did he treat other family members in the house, Natalie?
Not very good. Like he was mean to them.
Yeah, kind of bossy. He expected his wife though to have breakfast on the table, and he was serious about his job, even though his job did not entail very much. First thing he did when he got to work was park himself outside the door of the bank, and he sat there most of the day. Across the way in view was the bar. He sat there on that certain corner day in and day out. That was his job until he was asked to do something. And so this is how this is going to fit into the story at this point, I don't know. But we're introduced to this new character. He works at the bank. It presents a whole chapter of people that are unwilling to change. And we got to now think about this in terms of Dickens tells us all of this to help for us to see what society and what the country was really like. Does anybody have anything to add to Tell's Bank or to Mr. Cruncher? Yes, Aaron.
No, sorry.
Anybody?
I have a question.
Now, go ahead. Before you say that, let me say this: that it did have a lot of difficult reading parts. Some of it, you just read the sentence and like, okay, that was a weird way to say that. It's Old English, but yet there was enough of it to give us a general picture of what was going on. Yeah.
So in the book it says he was a pastime grave robber. Does that mean he actually, like, robbed dead people's graves, or am I just being wrong?
Did anybody pick that up in the story? I didn't pick that up, but some of it,
I could have just under.
some of it could have been, and I missed it.
So I missed that, but it could have said that, but meant it more as like he took people's money like a tax collector would.
By the way, that does bring up a point. If you went to Tell's Bank and you went in there to get money out, what were they really suspicious about? Your signature,
If it's forged.
who you were, was it forged? They inspected all of that very closely. So evidently there must have been a lot of forgeries and cheating and different things going on. And so even, it was an old bank, but they looked very closely at, by the way, Jessica, where was the money stored? Was it in a nice expensive vault? What was it stored in? I think I saw an old wooden box mentioned. And all the money smelled old, the notes, everything smelled old. And if you went in there and asked for your money, here you are in this ugly place, and you wait there, and they look at your signature, and they bring out this old box, and there's your money. How many of you would want to put your deposit into that bank? Not really.
That's why we have digital banks now.
Yeah. All right. So for tomorrow, go ahead and read that next chapter. And now let's turn in our literature books. I'll give you the number here in a second. Let me just write up here. For now, chapter 2 of this new section.
I want your eye there. Let the man sleep, okay?
Or you can call it chapter 8 if you want. All right, passive and active voice. Go ahead and turn in your books to page 102.
Yeah.
By the way, how many of you have saw the papers your parents got about midterms?
Was it good or bad?
And it's this school here, if you remember last year, I came in around the end of January, February, a month later we had the virus thing, midterms and all that stuff was canceled. So I never have been here for this, but evidently when you do the midterms here, it's like all done in 1 week, and it's like just tests and tests and tests.
It's painfully hard.
Yeah.
Now
so
this
we
is-
should have one.
So I want to tell you about how I'm going to do mine, even though I thought I was doing my own midterm, and they told me no, we want it done this way, so that's what we're going to do. But you're already getting midterm tests in your classes that you have 5 days a week, which in my classes, so that excludes creative writing, no midterms. But in English we will. And so basically in the sections of literature that we've been over, if you look back through, there's probably about 10 units that we're up to right now from this first half, and so basically we will have about 10 questions from 10 units. And then I will select 10 questions which will just be from the literature that we have read from the beginning of the year. And so it'll just be, you know, I might throw in there, we have a quiz on Friday on these first chapters of Tale Tuesday. Might be a quiz, question from there in there. Mrs. Hinch, that old story from way back.
I don't remember much
Just
of
some of the literature stories. Before we take that test, I'll even tell you for the literature side, what stories we're talking about, because
Thank you.
some of that,
Will Tale of Two Cities be on the Bible?
okay?
You just-
What's that?
Never mind.
All right. Let's look at page 102 and get through this, and we'll go ahead and get you off on your homework. Your homework will be page 103, C and D. Everyone see that? But let's go ahead and go over our rules, and then we'll do exercise A together, and then get you off on your homework.
I'm sorry, I forgot my grammar book.
Just follow along, and you'll be fine. You can slide over there next to Laurel if you want. Okay, using active and passive voice. If the subject is doing the action, the transitive verb is the active voice. If the subject is doing the action, then it's active voice. Everyone say that with me. If the subject is doing the action, then it's active voice. On the other hand, if the subject is receiving the action, then it is a
Doing the
passive voice. So if the subject is doing the action, it's an active voice. If it's receiving the action, it's a passive voice. Look at number 2. When the verb is changed from active to passive, the object of the verb becomes the subject, and the subject becomes the object of the preposition. Look at the examples. Mr. Williams, the subject, gladly received the refund. What did he receive? When we ask the question what, we know it's the direct object. He received the refund. Now look how we turn that around. The refund subject was gladly received by Mr. Williams. So Mr. Williams, he's the object of the preposition. And so we just switched the thing around there.
What page are we on?
That would be we just changed it from active to passive by doing that. Again, page 102. Go ahead and open your book.
I got it, don't worry.
Look at number 3, and we'll try some of these together. A verb in the passive must always contain a form of the verb be, which is am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. Jack?
What?
Oh, dang it.
Let's pay attention.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on. They're laughing for some reason. Something funny, I guess.
Okay, so if it's going to be in the passive, it's going to have the form of the verb be. Okay? Plus the past participle with d, ed, t, or en endings. Look at number 4. And then we'll try some. In writing, use the passive voice sparingly. Overuse of the passive voice causes a weak and awkward style. However, there are occasions when the passive is more natural and emphatic than the active. Look at that down there at exercise A. And what I'm mainly concerned about is that you can identify the transitive verb. You're going to underline the transitive verb in each sentence, and then you're going to tell me whether or not it's being used as active or passive. Let's look at the first one. Before AD 1200, Finland was occupied by loosely connected tribes. Was occupied. Now, if you like to look up into number 3 in your rules, a verb in the passive must always contain the form of the word be. And so what do we see here in this first one? We see that it was occupied. Okay? Is that noun carrying out an action, Laurel?
No.
So what would it be?
It would be passive.
Passive, correct.
What is a transitive verb?
Let's try the next one.
Wait, Mr. Jacob.
If the noun is carrying out an action, in most cases it's going to be in the active voice. If it's receiving, the noun is receiving the action, then it's going to be in the passive voice. Look at the next one. From 1200 through 1700, Finland was dominated. What's the clue there, Gracie?
I have a question. For number 1, what was the transitive verb?
It says if the subject is doing the action, the transitive verb is the active voice. And so the voice, if you look at the example there, it says a hornet stung. Okay? That's your transitive verb right there. It stung. And then in the passive, it was stung. So one's carrying out the action, the other verb, when we put was in, turns it around into a passive. So what would number 2 be, Gracie?
I don't know. I was asking what number 1 was. So.
Number 1, we had was occupied. Anytime you use a form of the word be, which in both of these 1 and 2 does, they are passive. How about Aaron, number 3?
Number 2, that's it. Okay. In 1809, Russia added Finland to its empire.
Okay.
Uh,
Who's doing the action there?
Russia.
So then
They
this would,
added
so this would be what?
active.
Active voice. Yep. The noun is doing the action. In the other case, the nouns are receiving action. And the indicator is the word was, a form of the word be. All these points to past. Number 4, Maddie Henry, number 4.
During the Russian Revolution of 1917, Finland declared its independence. It's declared as active.
It's active. Finland is the one doing the action. Finland declared. Quentin, number 5.
Northern Finland is inhabited by the Lapps. A nomadic tribe is inhabited. Is a transitive or verb, probably.
Yep.
Okay, and that'd be passive because it is inhabited.
Yep. It's
Not-
using the form of the word be, and so it automatically indicates transitive. And if you just look at it and say, Northern Finland is the one getting the action done to it. It's not carrying out the action, it's being invaded. And so that tells you automatically that it's passive. Shane, are you understanding what we're doing? Try number 6 and see what you think.
Yeah, I don't even want to try to say that.
Jan,
How do you...
Sibelius,
Sibelius, a famous composer, based many of his works on the collection of Finnish poems.
what would be the verb there?
Based.
Based. Yeah. So now would that be passive or active?
Active.
It's active because the subject, the Sibelius composer guy, he based. He's doing action. He's not receiving the action. And remember that if we wanted to turn this around, in case in our homework, we could turn this around by just turning it around using a object of the preposition and making the subject become the object. We can turn it from being active to passive. So you might need to use, for the homework, relook at these roles, okay? So your homework, if you flip to the next page, first let's finish these here. We got 7 through 10 on the next page. But I want you just to go ahead and do exercise C, and
We're gonna do 7, 8.
Did you give an example of how you do C?
follow along. I'm going to talk about it here. All of the following sentences contain verbs in passive voice. Rewrite these sentences in which the passive voice is not as natural and effective as the active voice. Now, if you turn back to the page we just went over, look at, let's see, number 2. Number 2 is the role, and it gives you examples there of how to turn that around and rewrite it. When a verb is changed from active to passive, the object of the verb becomes the subject, and the subject becomes the object of the preposition. And it gives you an example there. So if you look there, it'll show you how you're going to rearrange the sentence by making the subject become the object of a preposition. Remember, a prepositional phrase always says something this of the night. It always has the preposition. For tonight, just try exercise C, and then we'll look over. We'll do B and D in class tomorrow.
If you look like
Yes.
give me that, cool. That's my only pen I have.
Yep, I did get that. While I got you, hang on here while I got you on the line here. Let me check your other stuff and see what we're going to need out
What?
And if you go basketball,
I'm rhyming.
you deserve it. A basketball.
I'm so tired. I went to bed later than I did last night.
Peace.
Gracie, you don't have class.
Went to bed at 2:30 last night, Kurt.
One thing, write this down, Lillian, because we want to get your grade built back up.
Hey, let's check, refresh your email.
You're missing the informative essay.
Can you refresh your email?
I'm trying to help Lillian.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were talking about.
What you are talking about your assignment?
Yeah, like, I sent it.
All right, let me check over it and
Okay,
I'll,
put it in there.
is that the informative?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
On esports. For sports.
Yes.
enough for you. I don't know. Is this better? Wait, how would I know that you got it?
100%, yes. Thank you. All right, Lillian, your informative essay
Kill it?
is,
Yeah, I
Is
tried
it
to
big?
beat it on the head.
I shot it, but I didn't
What?
get it.
I tried to beat it on the head of the stick,
And,
but I didn't kill it, so like crap. I gotta go get it again.
do you remember that? What you need to do with that? Okay, so write that down. Also, one of the reasons your grade is low is that there was a creative exercise, creative writing on December 10th, and that was about your feelings about the election and how things were done unfairly and cheating and all. That was just a one-page creative writing. You need to write that down. You've got a 0 in that because you never turned it in. And if you turn that in, I will go ahead and change it, okay? Let me see what else. Also, back on December 4th, there was a paper that we did. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times for our Tale of Two Cities story. You were to write a creative paper on how today is much like that in our world today. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Okay? So those are 3 things. The next one is in literature, page 98, the questions in literature on page 98. Write that down. On page 73 to 76, let's see what that is. Grammar, page 73 to 76, back on the 20th of November when I was in the hospital. Whoever was here that day gave you the grammar assignment, 73 to 76. Write that down. On November 15th, there was a descriptive paragraph number 2. And then, last of all, thinking zone questions on page 64 to 65. So, Lillian, because those didn't get turned in, those 6 assignments right there all turned to zeros and put you in the F category. So, but I will give you the grace that if you begin to turn these in, we will change them, and I'm not going to do this every quarter for you though, because if assignment is given, then I expect that when that assignment is due the next day that you turn it in with everyone in the class. So I will do this for you this time, but then I expect you to write down your assignments each day and to get them turned in on time. Okay? Do the very best you can do, but I will help you get caught up. So those are the list of the assignments. You have them now. So begin to get them done and Google them to me, and I will slowly begin to change them in the grade book.
I already have a few of them done, so I can turn them in now.
Yep, you can send them anytime.
I did get the 1 page done.
Yep, I did get one, and I did change one already that you sent me.
Alright.
Okay? And you can go on RenWeb and see these same assignments that I mentioned to you, but just like I'm in school, don't be afraid to, like you did today, to holler at me, and I will take the time with you to help you get caught up. If you're going to be at home, then make it work for you, but whether home or here, we need to get you caught up with everybody and getting things turned in on time, okay?
Okay.
Alright, I'm heading off to lunch. You have a good lunch yourself.
You too.
Bye-bye.